The sky over Kesh Prime was painted in hues of violet and deep red, the twin suns dipping below the serrated horizon. A humid breeze whispered to the metallic trees, their silver leaves catching the last rays of light. I had grown used to the planet's oddities, the way its gravity pulled just a little too hard, the way the air hummed in my lungs. It was a strange world, but after 2 years working as an independent researcher, I had learned to adapt. Zisha stood across from me, her elongated form silhouetted against the fading light. Her kind, the Keru, were a paradox of elegance and lethality, with bioluminescent markings that pulsed along their skin like shifting constellations. She had always been reserved, keeping to the calculated distance expected of interspecies friendships. But tonight, there was something restless in her movements. "I need your help." Her voice, layered with an almost musical resonance, held a weight I had never heard before. I set down my scanner, studying her carefully. Zisha was not the type to ask for favors lightly. "With what?" She hesitated, her bioluminescence dimming slightly. "It's complicated. My cycle has begun." The words didn't register immediately, but when they did, I stiffened. The Keru mating cycle was a biological imperative, something I had read about but never discussed with her. It wasn't a casual event. It was an ordeal. The record described it as an overwhelming force, an instinctual drive that could consume their thoughts, pushing them to seek a bond, to complete a process that was as much survival as it was reproduction. "Zisha," I tread carefully, "I don't understand what you're asking." She exhaled sharply, her pupils contracting. "I wouldn't ask if I had another option. Normally, there are partners chosen before the cycle begins, but I waited too long." She clenched her hands, her claws retracting and extending in unconscious agitation. "Without assistance, the effects will escalate. My body will break itself down. The pain will become unbearable." There was something unspoken between her words, something fragile beneath her controlled exterior. The Keru were not a species that showed vulnerability easily. To admit this to me, a human, an outsider, meant she had no one else to turn to. I ran a hand through my hair, forcing myself to think past the discomfort curling in my chest. What exactly would I have to do? She turned away as if ashamed. "It's not what you're thinking." Her tone was clipped, defensive. "Physical mating isn't necessary. My species forms temporary neural bonds during the cycle. It stabilizes the mind and body. Usually it's shared between mates, but a strong mental presence can substitute in emergencies. A neural bond. I had heard of it, but the idea of linking my mind with hers made my skin prickle. It wasn't just about proximity. It was about connection, a direct merging of thoughts, instincts, and emotions. "You're sure this won't have any lasting effects?" I asked carefully. Zisha finally met my eyes, her expression unreadable. "I don't know." I should have said no. Every instinct told me that this was beyond my understanding, beyond what I had come here to study. But she was my friend, and right now, she was in pain. "I'll do it," I said. Relief flickered across her face, but was fleeting. She stepped closer, the glow along her skin intensifying. "Then we don't have much time." The process was not what I expected. We sat across from each other, the cool ground beneath us, the night thick with alien sounds. Zisha placed her clawed hands lightly against my temples, her touch firm but careful. "You might feel disoriented," she warned. Before I could question what that meant, the connection slammed into me like a tidal wave. My vision blurred, and suddenly, I wasn't just in my body anymore, I was in hers. I could feel the raw tension coiling beneath her skin, the pressure mounting, an ache so deep it felt as if her very cells were unraveling. Her mind was vast, a storm of fragmented sensations, and I was being pulled into the current. Instinct screamed at me to fight it, but I forced myself to breathe, to ground myself. I focused on stabilizing, offering calm where she had none. Zisha inhaled sharply, her bioluminescence flaring. The storm inside her began to ease, the unbearable strain slowly melting into something more bearable. She exhaled, and for the first time since the cycle began, I felt her tension ease. And then something shifted. It was subtle at first, like a second heartbeat threading through my own, a rhythm not mine yet suddenly familiar. The bond wasn't just stabilizing her, it was linking us. Something deeper than words, deeper than thought, wove between us, threading through every cell in my body. I felt her relief, her gratitude. But there was something else, something possessive. I tried to pull back, to regain my sense of self, but the bond didn't break. It tightened. Zisha's eyes snapped open, her pupils blown wide. She looked at me as if she were seeing me for the first time, her bioluminescence pulsing in an unfamiliar pattern. Her fingers curled slightly against my skin, and her expression changed in a way I couldn't quite decipher. "You stayed," she murmured, a strange reverence in her voice. I swallowed hard, an unease curling in my stomach. Yeah, I did. And that was when I realized something had gone terribly, terribly wrong. I woke with a start, my breath sharp in my throat. The air felt heavier than before, pressing against my skin like an unseen weight. For a moment, I thought I was still caught in the bond, still drowning in Zisha's presence, but then the familiar edges of my surroundings came into focus. The dim glow of the bioluminescent flora outside my quarters cast shifting shadows along the walls, and the faint hum of the base's life support system thrummed in my ears. Everything looked the same, but I felt different. Zisha was there, standing near the entrance, watching me. Something about the way she looked at me sent a shiver down my spine. It wasn't the careful neutrality I was used to, the measured distance of a Kara warrior. This was something else, something deeper. The bioluminescent lines along her skin pulsed in slow, rhythmic waves, and I recognized the pattern from a bond. The thought sent a fresh wave of unease through me. I sat up too quickly, my head swimming. My body was sluggish, uncooperative. What happened? My voice came out hoarse, rougher than I expected. Zisha didn't answer right away. She tilted her head slightly, studying me in a way that made my skin prickle. "You stabilized me." Her voice carried something unreadable beneath its usual calm. More than I expected. I ran a hand through my hair, trying to shake the lingering disorientation. "That's good, right?" A pause. Then, softly, "Yes?" She stepped forward, and I instinctively tensed. She noticed. Of course, she did. Her kind were built to read body language, to detect shifts in scent, heartbeat, expression. But instead of addressing it, she simply crouched beside the bed, her movements slow, deliberate. "Do you feel different?" I hesitated. Lying seemed pointless. "Yeah, a little." Her expression shifted, though I couldn't tell if it was concern or something else. "It's the bond." Something cold settled in my gut. "You said it was temporary." I said I wasn't sure. I stared at her, hoping she would break into one of those rare, dry chuckles and tell me this was all some kind of cultural misunderstanding. But she didn't. She just watched me with that quiet intensity, waiting. I swung my legs over the side of the bed, testing my balance. The moment my feet touched the floor, Zisha moved closer, just slightly, almost imperceptibly. It wasn't enough to be overt, but I felt it, like she was positioning herself between me and the door. I kept my voice steady. "How bad is it?" "The bond has deepened." She exhaled, slow and measured, as if tasting the air between us. "I can feel you more clearly now. Your presence, your emotions." Her gaze flickered over me, as if she could see the connection in real time. "I don't think it will fade." A cold prickle ran down my spine. That wasn't part of the deal. Her expression darkened slightly, the glowing lines along her arms shifting in a ripple of color. It wasn't a deal. It was survival. I pushed myself to my feet, ignoring the way the room tilted slightly. "Then we need to figure out how to fix it." Zisha's fingers twitched at her sides, a small, almost involuntary movement. "Fix it." I hesitated. The way she said it, low, careful, like she was tasting the words, sent a flicker of something uneasy through me. "You know what I mean. Undo it." Her jaw tightened, just for a second. "That isn't possible." I almost laughed, but it came out more like a sharp exhale. "You don't know that." "I do." She was still too close. Not threatening, not yet, but undeniably there. A presence that wasn't going to leave. "The bond is complete." "That's not." I stopped myself, pressing a hand to my temple. My skin felt too warm. My pulse just a little too fast. You should have told me this could happen. I didn't know it would happen, she said, her voice taking on a rare edge. A Kara bond isn't meant to form with an outsider. It shouldn't have been possible at all. Then why did it? She was quiet for a moment, then softer, almost reverently. Because you stayed. Something in her tone made my stomach twist. I took a slow breath, steadying myself. Zisha, I helped you because you're my friend. That's all. She studied me, unblinking. That's not what the bond says. I swallowed hard. It doesn't matter what it says. I didn't agree to this. Her gaze flickered, her bioluminescence dimming slightly. Not in anger, but in something that almost looked like confusion. Would you have left me to die? I hesitated, and that was enough for her. She stepped even closer, close enough that I could feel the faint warmth radiating from her skin. I would not have let you suffer, had it been you in my place. I shook my head, trying to clear the thick, sinking weight in my chest. That's not the same. She tilted her head, considering me. Isn't it? I needed space, distance, air. I took a step back, and her pupils dilated slightly, her muscles tensing in response, as if my retreat was something unnatural, something she wasn't supposed to allow. My pulse hammered my ears. This wasn't just about biology anymore. I need to think, I said. It wasn't a request. She hesitated, then gave the barest nod. I will wait. There was something in the way she said it that made me feel like she wasn't just waiting for me to decide. She was waiting for me to accept. The base felt smaller than it had before, the corridors pressing in as I walked, my footsteps too loud in the artificial silence. The sterile glow of the overhead lights did little to ease the tension coiling in my chest. Zisha wasn't following me. Not openly, but I could feel her presence, lingering just beyond the edges of my awareness. Whether it was a bond or just my nerves, I couldn't tell. I needed a way out of this. The console in my quarters blinked softly as I keyed in the comm system. There were only a handful of other humans stationed on Kesh Prime, most of them researchers like me, scattered across the planet's surface. I scrolled through the list, my fingers pausing over Dr. Anika Voss's name. If anyone could help, it was her. She specialized in xenobiology, had spent years studying physiology. If there was a way to break this, she would know. The screen flickered, and a moment later, Anika's face appeared, her dark brows furrowing at the sight of me. You look like hell, she said, skipping any pretense of greeting. Yeah, well, I exhaled, running a hand to my hair. It's been a long night. She leaned forward, studying me with clinical intensity. What happened? I hesitated. Saying out loud felt dangerous, like solidifying something I wasn't ready to accept. But there was no point in dancing around it. I bonded with Ikaru. For a second, there was only silence. Then Anika let out a sharp breath. You what? It wasn't intentional. I said quickly. Zisha was in pain. She needed stabilization. I didn't know it would be permanent. Anika's expression darkened. And now, I swallowed hard. She won't let me go. She muttered a curse under her breath, shaking her head. That's bad. No kidding. I mean it, Nathan. Her voice lost its usual detached tone. Kara bonds aren't just biological. They're psychological, emotional. It's not something that can just wear off. You're part of her now. A chill ran through me. There has to be a way to undo it. Anika hesitated, and that pause told me more than I wanted to know. There are theories, she said carefully, but breaking a bond forcibly, it could kill her. I felt the blood drain from my face. You're serious? She nodded grimly. Kara don't survive severed bonds. It's not just an attachment. It's a fundamental restructuring of their neural patterns. If you cut her off, it could cause catastrophic damage. Best case, she survives but loses a part of herself. Worst case, she trailed off, letting the words hang between us. I slumped back against the console, my pulse hammering in my ears. There has to be another way. Anika sighed. Maybe, but it wouldn't be easy. She hesitated before continuing. as if debating whether she should even say it. If you could convince her to voluntarily release you, it might weaken the bond naturally. It's rare, but it has happened. The problem is, she doesn't want to. I finish for her. Anika's expression softened just slightly. Nathan, to her, you're not just some random human anymore. You're her mate. You being here, staying with her, reinforces that bond every second. The longer it lasts, the harder it will be to break. A creeping dread curled in my stomach. Every instinct told me I needed to get out of here before it was too late. A faint shift in the air sent a ripple of awareness through me, and I turned sharply, only to find Zisha standing just outside the doorway. I didn't know how long she had been there. Anika must have seen my expression because she tensed. Is she there? I gave the barest nod. Zisha stepped forward, moving with that impossible grace that made it seem like she wasn't walking at all, just shifting through space. Her bioluminescence pulsed in slow, steady waves, a rhythm that felt dangerously familiar now. I have to go, I said quickly, cutting the connection before Nika could protest. Zisha's eyes flicked to the darkened screen. You're searching for an answer, she said, voice unreadable. I forced myself to stay calm. I need to understand what's happening to me. Her expression was neither anger nor surprise, just quiet certainty. You already know. I swallowed hard. Zisha, this isn't what I wanted. Her head tilted slightly, a slow blink that made her seem eerily still. It doesn't matter what you wanted. It has already happened. I took a step back. She mirrored me with an almost unconscious ease, like a predator tracking movement. My heart pounded against my ribs. I can't stay here, I said carefully. Something flickered in her gaze. Something sharp. You can... I exhaled through my teeth. You're not listening. I am listening. Her voice was impossibly calm. I hear your heartbeat. I feel your hesitation, your fear. She stepped closer. But I also feel your presence inside me. You can deny it, but it's still there. I clenched my fists, trying to keep my breathing steady. You don't understand. Zisha, I'm not Karu. I can't live like this. Her expression tightened, the first real sign of frustration. You think I do not know that? Her claws flexed slightly, her bioluminescence flaring, then dimming just as quickly. You think I do not feel the difference? That I do not know the risk. I blinked. Risk? Her jaw tightened. I do not know what this bond will do to you, Nathan. It is not meant for your kind, but you are already changing. I can feel it. A cold shiver ran through me. You fear being trapped, she continued, quieter now. But so do I. You are not the only one who had no choice. Something in her voice made me hesitate. It wasn't desperation, not exactly, but it was close. For the first time, I considered the possibility that Zisha wasn't just keeping me here because she wanted to. She was keeping me here because she didn't know what would happen if she didn't. My mouth was dry. We have to find a way to fix this. Zisha's gaze lingered on me for a long moment. Then, finally, she said, then we will find one together. But something in her eyes told me she didn't truly believe that. The jungle beyond a research outpost was dense, the towering metallic flora casting long, shifting shadows under the twin moons. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and alien blossoms, a reminder that Kesh Prime was as alive as it was dangerous. I had spent months mapping these forests, cataloging their species, learning the terrain. Now, for the first time, I was using that knowledge to escape. I moved carefully, keeping my breathing even, my steps deliberate. The bond made it harder to focus. Zisha's presence pressed at the edges of my awareness, a constant hum in the back of my mind. It wasn't just a sensation of being watched. It was deeper, more intimate. A pulse that wasn't mine, emotions that bled into my own, foreign instincts whispering at the edges of my thoughts. I knew she would come for me. Breaking the bond wasn't an option. Anika had made that clear. Severing it could kill her. And despite everything, despite my fear, I couldn't condemn Zisha to that fate. But I could put distance between us. I had to believe that if I got far enough away, the connection would weaken, give me space to think, to breathe. The problem was, I wasn't sure if I wanted it to. That was the real danger, wasn't it? the way the bond worked. It wasn't a shackle. It was a tether, a slow, insidious pull that made the thought of leaving feel wrong. My body ached with it. Some instinct I didn't understand whispering that I was going the wrong way, that I should turn around, that I should go back to her. I clenched my jaw and forced myself forward. The undergrowth shifted behind me. I spun, my pulse hammering, but there was nothing, just a quiet rustling of leaves in the breeze. Except there was no breeze. I turned back around, and Zisha was there. She stood at the edge of the clearing, illuminated in the moonlight, her bioluminescence casting an eerie glow against the darkened foliage. She wasn't out of breath. She wasn't tense. She had simply appeared, as if the jungle itself had parted to let her pass. I took a step back. She took a step forward. My breath came fast and shallow. You followed me. Zisha tilted her head slightly. I didn't need to. The meaning settled in my gut like a stone. She hadn't tracked me. She had felt me. No matter how far I ran, she would always know where I was. I swallowed hard. Zisha, you have to let me go. Her pupils expanded slightly, a slow inhale shifting through her chest. That is not how this works. I shook my head. It has to be. I can't. My voice cracked. I forced the words out. I can't live like this. She was silent for a long moment. Then, quietly, neither can I. Something in her tone made my throat tighten. I told you before, she said, stepping closer. Her gaze locked onto mine. This bond was not meant for your kind, but it was not meant for me either. My brows furrowed. What are you saying? Zisha exhaled slowly. Among my people, bonds are sacred. They are chosen, controlled. What happened between us was unnatural. Her expression was unreadable, but her bioluminescence shifted, a slow, uncertain ripple across her skin. I was desperate. My body was failing. I reached for you, and you reached back. I swallowed. I was trying to help. You did. She took another step forward, and I forced myself not to retreat. But you are human. Your mind was not made for this. And yet, the bond formed anyway. Do you not wonder why? My mouth was dry. I had been trying not to. Zisha continued, her voice softer now, almost reverent. I should not be able to feel you like this. You should not be able to feel me. She hesitated, then, barely above a whisper, and yet you do. A slow, cold realization settled over me. This wasn't just biology. Something had changed, not just in her, in me. I had felt it from the moment I woke up after the bond was formed. The heaviness in my limbs, the heightened awareness, the way I could sense her even when she wasn't there. I had told myself it was just the lingering effects of the connection, something that would fade with time. But what if it wouldn't? What if I was already changing? Panic clawed at my chest. We have to find a way to fix this. Zisha watched me, unreadable. Do you truly want to? I hesitated. And that was all the answer she needed. She stepped closer, closing the space between us. You are afraid of losing yourself. I exhaled sharply. I am myself. Her gaze bore into mine. Are you? I wanted to say yes. I wanted to tell her that I was the same person I had been before, that nothing had changed. But I could feel the lie pressing against my tongue. Because I wasn't the same. I wasn't sure I ever would be again. Zisha reached out slowly, her claws retracting, her touch hesitant as her fingers brushed against my wrist. The moment our skin met, the bond surged, a rush of sensation that stole the breath from my lungs. Not just emotions, thoughts, memories, something deeper than words. It wasn't possession. It wasn't control. It was understanding. And in that moment, I knew there was no escape, not because she wouldn't let me go, but because some part of me, some part one didn't want to admit existed, didn't want to leave. Zisha's voice was barely a whisper. We will find a way. Together. I should have pulled away. I didn't.